I'm Kevin James, and I'm heard on 870 KRLA weeknights at 9 o'clock. I do want to welcome everyone to the fourth stop on Salem Communications' 12-city national tour, where our syndicated talk show hosts offer their insights and opinions on the first 100 days, and I'm still training myself to say these two words next to each other, of President Obama's administration. I do want to begin by thanking our very, very important sponsors for this event, the Cancer Center of Irvine, freehomerefi.com, and Cure International. There are information up on all these sponsors, information on our website at KRLA870.com. Take some time to spend a little time with them. It's a really great group. Now, before we meet our panel, I do want to caution everyone in the room that your attendance this evening could result in your being included on Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano's list of right-wing extremists. I know I join all of our hosts when I say, welcome to the club. Now that our disclosures and warnings are taken care of, let's meet the KRLA panel for this evening's event. He is the 6th most listened to radio talk show host in the country. So I'm not the 6th most listened to radio talk show host in the room. He began his radio talk show career in 1978 at the age of 17. He has hosted talk shows all over the country, from Dayton, Ohio to Greenville, South Carolina, to Albany, New York, to New York City, to Dallas, Texas. He is a Fox News Channel contributor and the author of Surrounded by Idiots, with the exception of tonight, Fighting Liberal Lunacy in America, heard from 6 to 9 a.m. each weekday morning on 870 KRLA. Please welcome Mike Galllagher. Sir. He has been in broadcasting since 1982, and he is in his 11th year of national syndication. He has lectured on all 7 continents and in 45 of our 57 states. New York's Jewish Week has described him as one of the 3 most interesting minds in American Jewish life. He frequently appears on cable news shows, as well as on The Early Show on CBS, and occasionally on NBC's Today Show. We won't hold that against him. He has written 4 books, including the best-selling Happiness is a Serious Problem, heard from 9 a.m. to noon each weekday on 870 KRLA. Please welcome Dennis Prager. He is a law professor and broadcast journalist whose nationally syndicated radio show is heard in more than 120 cities across the country, a frequent guest on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. He has written for the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Los Angeles Times, and he is a conservative. In In a 2006 profile for The New Yorker, he was described as the most influential conservative that you have never heard of. He is the author of 8 books, including 2 New York Times bestsellers, and serves as the executive editor of the widely read townhall.com. Heard from 3 to 6 p.m. each day on 870 KRLA. Please welcome Hugh Hewitt. Yeah.
Thank you. Dennis is already upsetting the apple cart. Dennis needs a piece of paper.
Dennis, do you need a pen?
Have I got a pen for Dennis?
Now, the only question that I'm going to ask all 3 of you gentlemen, the same question, goes to all 3 of you. What letter grade? What letter grade? A, B, C, D, or F? Would you give President Obama for his first 100 days? And briefly, Galllagher, why? Start with you, Mike.
Well, it's easy. A lot of people say, what kind of job do you think President Obama has done thus far, or what has he done right? And unfortunately, I rack my brain. I think, well, he got the captain back with the Somali pirates thing. There's that. And it dawns on me, if that's the best you can come up with during the first 100 days, and seriously, because this is a guy whose ideology is wrecking the country, a guy whose philosophies are taking us in a decidedly radical leftist direction, I'm sorry, if the best I can do is say he sort of stumbled into 2 executive orders that said take those Somali pirates out, I got to give him an F. Sorry, an F.
All right, Mike Galllagher, an F. Dennis Prager.
First, I want to say to all of you, I want to commend you on your courage for staying indoors with this number of people, despite the warnings of our Vice President. You're a courageous group of Americans. You were told not to gather where anyone might sneeze, and for all you know, your neighbor has HNRX 2356 4911. Or is that a Notre Dame play? I don't remember exactly. All right. This is the only question that Kevin told us we would get. We don't know the other ones. And we were told this actually while I was shaving in the men's room, and Kevin walked in and told me. So I thought about it, and let me just tell you my angst. I don't want, and those of you who hear me, which is most of you, I guess, know that I'm being totally candid with you. I don't want to give him an F for 2 reasons, frankly. One is I don't want my president to get an F, whatever his party. I'm rooting for my president because it's still my country. Number 2, I don't want us conservatives to be predictable. So there's a big part of me that wants to say B-. Sound like a great guy, giving the guy a chance, but I'd be lying to you. On everything that matters to me, I think he does get an F. And listen, I don't know why one would think otherwise. Can you name anything that those of us who wish to conserve principles that we stand for would find an echo in the White House? And I don't think you can name anything. So it's not an insult to him, and it's not an insult to us. If we, and I don't know what Hugh will rate him, and I'm most interested, and we'll find out momentarily, but if I give him an F, or if Mike does, or some other, or you do, it's no insult to you or to them. Everything he has done has been radical. Everything. I will talk about this in the course of the evening, because I told Mike that I will only speak twice as long as he did. So I've already met that barrier. But I do want to talk to you about how all of this was anticipated. He is utterly true to form, and it is very sad to me to have to say that. When the President of the United States cheerfully walks over to Hugo Chavez, grabs him like a long-lost buddy. I'll tell you what hurt me, and then I'll desist. What hurt me, believe it or not, was not so much for America. It hurt me for the Democrats of Venezuela. If I were fighting Chavez and his goons and his thugs and his autocracy and what may end up a lifelong tyranny, and then saw the beacon of freedom on earth, its president, go over to this man doing this to us, everything that I would fight for would seem to be lost. The apology that he owes is not to the American people. It is, ironically, to the Venezuelan people.
But what was the grade, Dennis?
Oh, I said F in the beginning. I said
Okay,
F. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right, good.
Okay.
Hugh.
Thank you, Kevin. Unruly talk show host being what we are, I want to steal a couple minutes here before I give you my grade. First, I want to say to those people over behind the podium, I know you're there, and I will wave at you occasionally throughout the evening. I was in the hallway, so I didn't hear, but I hope that in the pre-show, we introduced the president's brother and his grandson. Did we do that? President Nixon's brother and grandson are with us tonight. Please stand up. It's a very special place for me, and it goes back to my having served the former president in San Clemente and then in New York, and then coming back here to oversee the construction with John Taylor and Kathy O'Connor and Sandy Quinn and a wonderful team, and Loie Gaunt, if Loie is here. So you're in the house that was built to honor a president who succeeded in some amazing ways, which I'm going to talk about tonight because of the parallels I see developing. So it's great to be in the Nixon Library. And three things, since it's a radio gig I have to sell. There is a movement underfoot that I think the Tea Parties showed, and the Tea Parties demonstrated there's a lot of conservative renewal, as have been the audience that we have seen in Dallas and Houston and San Antonio this week, tomorrow in Sacramento, Phoenix, on throughout the country. And we're knitting it together with Town Hall Magazine. It's become the magazine of talk radio, the magazine of conservative resurgence. If you're not yet a subscriber, you can help build the movement by subscribing to Town Hall Magazine, and I hope you will take advantage of that. Second, we're sending a petition around tonight, because if you like talk radio, and I assume you're here because of that, the performance tax will kill talk radio. It's a backdoor attack. It's not the fairness doctrine. It's an attack on radio that would impose a fee for every song played on the radio in contravention to the historic doctrine or the historic deal between radio and performance. And so we'd like to make sure that Congress knows that the performance tax offends everyone in this room. And then finally, we've started TalkPac, TalkPac.com. TalkPac is a political action committee designed to support the congressmen who support free speech and to disenfranchise and unelect those who don't. And TalkPac is a singularly powerful vehicle for doing that. Whether you can contribute $10 or the maximum of $5,000, please join TalkPac so we can demonstrate to Congress to leave us alone doing what we do. Finally, one word about Kevin James. If you have not listened on KRLA, from 9 to 11 every night, you are missing the best local radio in Los Angeles. Absolutely the best.
Thank you, sir.
All right, my grade. I give him a C. I give him a C because I average all the grades that he gets. And he gets an A for Afghanistan. He gets an A for keeping David Petraeus in place. He gets an A for retaining General Jones as his national security advisor. He gets an A for asking Bob Gates to stay on. And he gets an A for having an extraordinarily wonderful family. I really do think the First Lady has done a magnificent job in her first 100 days in office. And I love the little girls. I think they just make you smile. So all that stuff, A. Everything else, F. But as I said, we're in the Nixon Library, and I think the former president would say that foreign policy matters first. The most important part of foreign policy is what matters most. The most important part of our foreign policy right now is Pakistan and Israel. And as to Pakistan, he's pouring the troops into Afghanistan. He's continuing to kill terrorists with Predator drones. So that's all good. Israel, not so good. Now, he hadn't flunked that test yet. It's just been postponed. And if and when the confrontation with Iran that I expect will happen about June 18th occurs, that's the presidential election, not long thereafter Ahmadinejad wins, there'll be a confrontation. He could blow it. But as for now, give him a C on the good stuff. The domestic policy, Dennis is right. He's taken the country in a radical direction. Mike is right. Except for shooting the pirates in Afghanistan, you don't see much action that we can agree with. But on that basis, a C.
Dennis, yesterday's LA Times had a feature story entitled, "It's All on Obama Now," taking the position that in just the last week, with the 100-day deadline arriving, Spectre crossing over, Obama pushing Chrysler into bankruptcy, Congress passing the White House's budget blueprint, and the opening of a seat on the Supreme Court, it's Obama's country now, and blaming Bush is stale and too far removed. First, Dennis, do you agree with the LA Times assessment? And second, when do you think the mainstream media will start blaming Obama and not Bush for trouble with our economy and for adverse results that may result from Obama's actions?
Who wrote that article in the LA Times? Was that an editorial, or was that
No, it was a Times staff writer, and I probably have a copy of it.
The only reason I ask, it's not critical to get the answer, but the only reason I ask is it seems atypical for an LA Times attitude, and I hope it is their attitude. Frankly, I think he wins no matter what. If things are bad for a long time, he will still say, look at what I inherited. It could have been so much worse had I not done what I did. So, and he will say that. Look, folks, remember America, look at what happened. And anyway, the first massive expenditure was TARP, done by Troubled Asset, what plan? What is the R? Recovery Plan? And that was done by President George W. Bush. George W. Bush and his greed and the Republicans removing all of the necessary laws on Wall Street and regulations on Wall Street, that is the reason for the mess that I got into. The Democrats will say this ad infinitum, and the country will or will not believe it, but he will be able to say it and will say it. How long will the press go along with that idea? As long as the press retains the values that it now has. The press, unfortunately, is largely a spokesperson for liberal values. And I'll give you, I mean, the examples are legion. I could spend the evening giving you examples, but the fact that George W. Bush was so often mocked for his lack of intelligence and his inability to speak properly, A, he's very bright, B, he spoke very well. I mean, I speak for a living, and I probably speak in that sense better than George W. Bush. I thought he spoke extremely fluently, and one might add, without teleprompters. No, I think, I don't know why. Can you imagine if George W. Bush or Dick Cheney traveled with teleprompters everywhere they spoke? I mean, everywhere, even for announcements of cabinet appointees? Do you realize what they would say? The man can't think. He has not an original idea. He has to rely on teleprompters. Or if Vice President of the United States had said on national television, I would tell my own family not to go on an airplane because someone might sneeze. I mean, and then the baloney that the press secretary said, he really meant that you shouldn't sneeze on an airplane. That's what he said. That is exactly, we played it on our shows.
You don't believe him?
That is correct. What they get away with, and what was never get awayable with, to the point where people started believing that we had a president who could not articulate. He couldn't say nuclear correctly. That was about it. Otherwise, he spoke fine. So when will the press stop? The press will stop when it changes its values, and I'm not counting on that as imminent.
We had an extraordinary opportunity, the last media interview that President Bush gave, he gave to a handful of us talk show hosts. And we had an opportunity to spend about an hour and a half with the president, one-on-one, very informal setting. It was actually the second or third time some of us had that privilege. And it is an extraordinary, I mean, coming here is just, you know, a reminder of the sanctity of that building and that room. And President Bush, one-on-one, is so unbelievably engaged. And I often said, if his critics, as vicious as they can be, could spend just 5 minutes in that setting that us handful of talk show hosts had the opportunity to have, they'd walk away with a different impression. You get a sense from President Bush, after spending that much time with him, that he truly was committed, morning, noon, and night, to keeping America safe from another terror attack, and he did that after 9/11. He did that. That was his accomplishment. And he told us, and again, you got to appreciate this setting. I mean, he kind of puts his feet up, you know, and he talks very casually, and I was so amazed at how engaged he is in minutia, how he knew about little things and tough things, and how smart he was. And Dennis is so right. This is a brilliant man, and who never got the benefit of the doubt from the mainstream press. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote about nuclear or nuclear. 4 times in that one-on-one setting, we were talking about nuclear disarmament and nuclear this and President Bush said, nuclear. And we're looking at each other and we're like elbowing each other, and it's like, and Hannity and I got on the front lawn and he said to me, did you hear? Did you hear? He says nuclear. He says it right. He said it right 4 times. So one of 2 things is going on. He's either got some kind of glitch when the word comes up, or he's crazy like a fox and wants to throw the mainstream media off into think that he's just a good old boy from Texas who doesn't say nuclear the right way. But I promise you, one-on-one, the man says nuclear correct. The moral of the story is he is such an impressive human being, and the mainstream media feels like they have advocated for Barack Obama. They feel that President Obama is their pick. And this media is never, ever going to give him the scrutiny or the criticism or the critique anywhere close to what he deserves because of that advocacy position that they put themselves in. They feel great ownership in President Obama's administration, and I don't think they're ever going to change as long as he's in the Oval Office, which we hope will be for just a little bit more than 3 years from now.
That's an incredible setup for the next question. Gentlemen, listen up.
I won't lie to you. If it turns out that a few years from now, people don't feel like the economy's turned around, that we're still having problems, that folks are still unemployed, that our healthcare system's not more efficient, then you guys won't applaud me next time I come down here.
Now, we did not rehearse that before Mike Galllagher just set up that piece. Hugh, you heard him say if it's not working in 4 years, he's out. Is that true?
He'll redefine working. You know, that'll be a redefinition. And I've already wondered, how is he going to save or create 3.5 million jobs? And it's in the save part of that definition. He's a pretty masterful rhetorician, and so of course he'll run for re-election. I think he'll run for re-election with a new vice president. I think if they were running odds on that right now in Vegas, Joe would be close to non-compete, stars and bars, as we say. But he'll be a very formidable candidate for re-election because he's a very formidable candidate. He'll raise another $1 billion. He'll have had 4 years of pork. He'll have allies, but events are in the saddle at this point. We really don't know where we'll be in 4 years. 104 days into George Bush's presidency, the Chinese had our plane on the island, if you can remember that. And everyone thought this was going to be a defining moment of the presidency, and 9/11 was 5 months in the future, 100 days in. So it's way too premature to come to any conclusion. But I will say this, I think we know less about him as an individual than I've known about any president 100 days in. And the reason for that is we knew less about him going in. When President Nixon was elected in 1968 and took office in 69, he was a very familiar figure on the international and world stage. World leaders knew him. Going back to Churchill and Khrushchev throughout the 50s, everyone had a fix on Richard Nixon. When President Reagan was elected, though he was not well known on the world stage, he was certainly well known in American politics. He had run for president before. He had fought his way back through the hotel rooms and the ballrooms of America as he campaigned for 4 years, been governor for 8 years. Bill Clinton, many could not ever purge the memory of his 1988 convention speech. It went on and on and on and on. And he had been around for 10 years in Arkansas, and the Arkansas Press Corps had a good fix on him and who he was and how he operated. And of course, the Bush family had been around politics for as long as American politics has been in the post-war era, but first Prescott and then George Herbert Walker Bush and then President Bush and Ted. Everyone had a fix on him. We know less about this president and who he is and how he operates than any other president who's ever become president. And that's a very unnerving thing. And he's had a phenomenal capacity to stay in the public eye and yet not reveal anything about himself. He's been out there a lot, and they had a wonderful date night in Georgetown this weekend, just wonderfully framed up. And I get the feeling that it's the first sort of true Hollywood president that we've had who is all about the appearance. And in 4 years, you can't keep that up. Not in the American presidency, not even with an adoring and subservient media, mainstream media. You cannot keep that up. And we will know a lot more in 4 years. But right now, we just don't know enough about it.
Not because I believe in bigger government. I don't.
Dennis, do you believe that the White House is being honest, not just with that clip, but with the American people when they told us on April 15th that the president is, quote, unaware of the Tea Parties? When they told us last week that the president was unaware that one of his two 747s was going to do a flyby of the 9/11 site at about the same time of the morning that the terrorist attack occurred, and that the president was not bowing to the king of Saudi Arabia.
It is a problem, actually, and it also coincides with what Hugh was just saying. I felt while he ran, and I feel now that I don't know him. I never felt that way about any candidate for president, whether I like the person or not, that being aside. I never engage in public psychoanalysis. But I will say this, and it does not undermine what I just said, but my theory about people is, and it's one of my broad generalizations, which always allows for exceptions, that the mother forms much of your emotional, psychological life, and a father forms much of your personality. And if it's not a father, then it's another male figure. Look at Clarence Thomas, who didn't know his father, by and large, and he has a very powerful personality. So I'm not speaking, those of you who are single moms, it doesn't mean your son or your daughter doesn't form a personality. There may well be a wonderful male figure in their lives, but there wasn't a wonderful male figure that much in his life. And it seems that his life has been devoted to finding himself. I don't think he's fully formed. I think he's brilliant. I think he has what I tell my friends constantly, he has preternatural confidence. A self-confidence that life itself should, he didn't do enough to earn such confidence. And it's not meant as an insult. It comes from somewhere that is either a gift of nature, of God, of happenstance, or what have you. And he does say things that roll off the tongue, like that first one, which you just played, Kevin, which I played on my radio show the next day. I don't believe in big government. I mean, how does he say that and believe it? I don't mind if he would say, folks, I do believe in big government. I do believe in spending. I see myself as the second Franklin D. Roosevelt, domestically speaking. Okay, then at least you have a sense of, I know myself. It's if he meant what he said, it's more frightening than if he didn't mean what he said. I have said to callers on rare occasion, I said, I don't mind that you're lying to me. I mind that you're lying to yourself. That's more scary. If he really doesn't believe that he's for big government and big spending, then what is one to make of his own self-assessment? So these are troubling matters. They are. We are in debts that people would never imagine, and I'll tell you why people can handle it. I don't compare, God forbid, money to lives, but Stalin made a statement, that was my field of study, was the Soviets and communist history, and so it was a well-known statement of Stalin, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. You can say that about dollars. $1 billion is a lot of money, $1 trillion is a statistic. And that's what we have entered now, where trillions are thrown out and Americans walk around and think, well, it's only one. It's preceded by the number one. That's very problematic.
I want to respectfully, and this is tough, I do this at great peril because remember the George Gobel line on The Tonight Show when he went out there once and he was with a bunch of distinguished guests and he said, "Did you ever feel the world is a tuxedo and you're just a pair of brown shoes?" Remember that line? I sort of feel that way with such great thinkers like Dennis Prager and Hugh Hewitt and Kevin, but I'm going to respectfully, mildly disagree over this belief that we don't really know who he is. Now, I'm kind of a meat and potatoes guy, and I'm a pitchforks and torches kind of guy. I think we're close to getting to the place where we need pitchforks and torches, but I really believe we know exactly who he is. I think we know that this is everything that a textbook, left-leaning, radical tax and spend liberal Democrat is. That's what he is. And these are good-hearted men who tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, as we all should, in this great Judeo-Christian ethic that we celebrate in this terrific country of ours. But no, I think if you look at his record on abortion and the destruction of human life, I think if you look at his position on spending, big spending, I think if you look at his position on guns and the Second Amendment, remember his support of the DC gun ban. I don't believe that he's going to leave this issue alone. I happen to respectfully believe that you look up a textbook definition of what it means to be a radical liberal Democrat, that's what we have with President Barack Obama. There's no mystery there at all, I don't think.
Kevin, I want to...
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to jump in here. There's a reason why I think we can be optimistic about this president, where he's going, and it's sort of, you have to, though, believe he's not fully formed, which Dennis said. And I think it's important because he's young, he is inexperienced, he's been climbing. But here's the reason. I'm a civilian. First of all, who's a veteran in the audience tonight? Can I see your hand? Thank you for your service, all of you. I'm a civilian, but I married into a military family. And I got to know from my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, career Marines, colonels, and then from a number of people I got to know in the government and since, that when you hang out with the American military, especially the professional military people who serve their whole lives, it impacts the way you view the world. They are extraordinary patriots, they are so self-sacrificing, and you cannot help but be impressed by who they are. If in fact the president is not fully formed, the best thing that will happen is, as Commander-in-Chief, he will be around the men and women in the United States military a lot. He already has been. And if he is, as Dennis suspects and I suspect, capable of sort of evolving, the more he spends with those men and women in uniform at Fort Bragg or at Pendleton or at Quantico or at Randolph or at any other places he goes, the more he tours the world in their company, the more convinced he will become, and the more, I think, almost by osmosis, it will sink in what an exceptional military commander, and that his job as Commander-in-Chief requires of him more than the radical mindset that Mike alludes to. In other words, I think by virtue of being Commander-in-Chief, you grow into the job that you need to have and into the character you must have in order to command such men and women. Let's hope.
Mike, let me ask you this, because taking into consideration the foreign policy decisions made by Obama thus far, the trips he's taken, his positions on Iraq and Afghanistan, on the war on terror, or whatever we call it, the dispute with the morally challenged, and enhanced interrogation methods, do you, Mike, feel more or less safe today living in this country?
No, I have 4 boys, and I pray for them every night. I think about my little grandbaby who was born, Lily Denise, born New Year's Eve of this year, 2009. And I fret for the future of our country, because I think that this presidency is, I believe, and the way I view the world, it's a series of snapshots. And one snapshot has been, and pardon my language, but this damnable insistence that harsh interrogation techniques that were successfully used to glean valuable information from our terrorist enemies is somehow immoral, illegal, unethical, and torture. And that gives us a snapshot, Kevin, I think, into the way this man views the world and the way he views our enemies. I don't think he views our enemies the way most of the people in this room view our enemies. They're not going to be negotiated with. They're not going to be persuaded into, I mean, yeah, I guess gentle persuasion is the bill if we all face Mecca and pledge our allegiance to Allah. Because until we do that, they want us dead. And they're not going to be talked to, as has been suggested by Madam Clinton, our Secretary of State, Madam Hillary, who thinks that persuasion and just waiting terrorists and all of that and win them over. It's a terrifying prospect to think that our president won't even call the war on terror the war on terror. And you alluded to that, Kevin. Again, a snapshot. This presidency is a series of hints. There are red flags that make one think that this man doesn't see our enemy as the mortal threat that it is. Releasing the documents of the harsh interrogation techniques to the world when he had a plethora of CIA directors, former directors. His current CIA director, Leon Panetta, said, don't do it. His aide said, listen, don't do this. Don't give specificity about our interrogation to the world. Now, I think most of us know what those documents revealed. They revealed that we jumped through hoops to make sure that we didn't slap anybody around without putting a neck brace on so we wouldn't hurt their neck. We waterboarded how many people? This room knows, 3. My gosh, Jon Stewart every night is wallowing about waterboarding like we waterboarded 150,000 people. It's like the Crusades. We waterboarded 3 bad guys over 6 years ago. I mean, and again, we got valuable information. Everybody has acknowledged it. So, no, I think that the definitive answer, and it's why I go back to your first question about the F that he deserves, because in keeping America safe, it is a resounding F. I think we are far less safe than we were under President Bush. And regrettably, if and when, God forbid, the day comes where we face another terror attack, we'll go back to the attitude we had after 9/11, where we're unified again, and we don't give a rat's rear end if we pour some water in the mouths of 3 bad guys in order to try to keep this country safe.
Dennis, the same question for you about how you feel living in America. As safe as before he was elected, or less safe now that he's in the office?
I do feel less safe. I feel less safe for things that Mike said, but for another reason, and that is that I would feel less safe if there were no war on terror with any president who had such high esteem for world opinion. This is a very dangerous thing. The world is a safe place to the extent it is solely because of the United States of America. And there is no one on the left that I know of who would agree with what I just said. The world will be safer if America is weaker, Europe is stronger, China is stronger, the United Nations is stronger, that the world be balanced more. They love equality. The inequality of American military superiority is offensive to the left, and he is as part of the left as the editors of the New York Times editorial page. And so that alone makes me less secure, because I do not want to rely whatsoever on the goodwill of the world. I do not care if the world loves the United States. The world has not loved the United States in my lifetime. When I was a child in elementary school, a book came out titled The Ugly American. When Richard Nixon appropriately went to South America, he was pelted with eggs on his trip to Latin America. Yankee go home was the phrase used in South America. I don't remember when the United States was loved. Maybe it was loved right after World War II and the Marshall Plan went into Western Europe, and during the Berlin airlift. And that was it. I have no desire for the US to be loved. It doesn't matter if we are loved. Infinitely better By the way, two things. Infinitely better is that we are respected and even feared. Those are far, far better. Not, by the way, I want to make this clear. Not far, far better for America, though it is. Far, far better for everyone in the world. The world needs a policeman. If you have a better candidate than America, please put the nomination forth. The better candidate of the left is the United Nations. And that, it is laughable. It is. It's pathetically laughable. It is a moral cesspool, the United Nations. It is a wasteland. Ask the people of Rwanda what the United Nations did for them. Ask the people of Cambodia what the UN did for them. Ask the 70 million killed in Mao's leap forward what the UN did for them. Ask North Koreans what the UN has done for them. The UN is an umbrella that is taken down when it begins to rain. And do you know who said that? The late Foreign Minister of Israel, Abba Eban, when Utant, the UN Secretary General in 1967, removed the UN troops from the Egyptian-Israeli border at Sinai because Nasser said, get them out. They are worthless. They are worse than worthless. The head of the UN Human Rights Commission for a while was Sudan. Is there anything more despicable? If you don't get angry over this, what is there to get angry over? And one were to ask then, do I feel more secure in people who believe in the UN? No, I don't.
I thought maybe I should ask Dennis that question. Hugh, Dennis said something just a moment ago that was very interesting. He talked about a nomination of someone better in the world than the United States to be the policeman of the world. And I had this question for you, Hugh. Do you think that President Obama would have a suggestion of someone better to police the world than the United States?
Well, Dennis always says a lot of interesting things. I hate following Dennis.
That wasn't on my rule book here, Hugh.
He deserves only bad things, this man. For a year, he announced on his show, don't bring Dennis cigars. He stopped smoking. So whatever this worldly punishments come to him are earned.
I may have misspoken on the cigars.
Crossed the line, did you?
That's a little. But I once was pleased to work with a great man of Southern California named Don Tarbell. If you've never used, Rick might even be here tonight, one of the Tarbells. And Don put on a big thing at the pond, and he said, would you mind emceeing a little bit afterwards for me? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. And then I realized I was following the lead singer from Mana La Mancha, the Irish dancers from Riverdance, and some elephants from Barnum and Bailey. And then I got to go on and talk for 20 minutes. A rule is never follow the elephants or Dennis. How many of you, by the way, were here for Dennis's roast? That was a wonderful night, wasn't it? Dennis didn't get to say anything until the end.
That's why it was wonderful.
It was wonderful for that. But I do not. What was the question again?
Dennis made a comment that...
Policemen, if we're not the policemen,
we're not the policemen. Here's what he believes.
Yeah.
He does not believe we are the policemen. He doesn't believe we have the moral authority to be the policemen. He said as much in Europe. He said it many, many times. Believe the man when he says we are not in a position to tell the world what we ought to be doing or what they ought to be doing. It's a morally bankrupt position to hold. It denies history. It denies our exceptionalism. But it is deeply, deeply ideological, and it is very troubling because ultimately when something has to... I was talking with our friends from Cure International, one of our great sponsors. Cure International... Scott is one of their vice presidents, got back from Zimbabwe a few years ago and went to work with Cure, great organization. We were talking downstairs before we came up. My opinion of Zimbabwe is it would take a platoon of American Marines to liberate a country that suffers in a way that no country suffers. It might take 2 platoons to do that for the Sudan, and we don't do it. And in not doing it, millions of people die. And so whenever the question is, they want us to do something, they come to us. But now I don't think the president will be willing to say yes when they want us to do something. And here's the problem. I'll ask my friend. It's because we've spent 6 years equivocating about the undeniably good thing we did when we liberated Iraq. Undeniably good. History will view it, if any history is fair, that we removed an ogre who routinely tortured, not 3 people with waterboarding, but tens of thousands of people with the loss of their lives, and threw people into pools full of Dobermans, one of the most vicious dictators in the history of modern times. And the left spent 6 years excoriating us for doing that, not just in order to take out President Bush, but to remove the moral basis on which American acts. And it's going to take another election or 2 to restore that, I'm afraid.
You all heard the exchange between Ann Coulter and Joy Behar the other night on CNN's Larry King Live. Did you hear this? This is a great exchange. I was telling Dennis and Hugh beforehand, and Dennis just howled. It is one of the great classic exchanges. Joy Behar was obnoxiously saying to Ann Coulter, "Well, Ann, if you're so big on waterboarding, why don't you go get waterboarded? You know, you should get waterboarded." And Ann Coulter didn't miss a beat, and she said, "Joy, you're so big on abortion, why don't you get aborted?"
She's pretty quick.
You gotta love Ann Coulter. Kevin, real quick,
Yeah.
all these guys always talk about their famous friends. That great line? I have one famous friend, and she's here tonight, and I want to quickly introduce you to her because she's a neat lady, and Hollywood has this rap that, you know, it's all a bunch of crazy, wild-eyed liberals who are just awful. And this lady is an icon and a legend, and she's been a family friend of ours for many, many years. She was like my late wife's sissy. They called each other their sissy, dear sisters. And she's here as my guest tonight, along with our good friends Margaret and Billy Steele. But please say hello to Emmy Award-winning actress Sally Struthers, who's over there in the corner, ladies and gentlemen. Not all these Hollywood types are bad, I promise, I promise. Thank you, Kevin.
You bet. Hugh, I want to go back to you, Hugh. We've heard a lot about, from the White House, about the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've heard all this economic gloom and doom. Now we're on the verge of a pandemic. Has the White House been promoting fear, and will either he or the country benefit from it? If so.
He has been promoting fear. He wants to change the playoff system to give USC a chance.
That's a problem.
It's for you, Bruce. No, he has been, you know, the whole first 3 months. I'm sorry. Are there SC people here? Who drove you? No. I'm sorry. I shouldn't do that. I'm sorry. He has been promoting fear from the first day. It's been the worst thing since, you know, Amity Shlaes came on my program, the great Amity Shlaes, whose book, The Forgotten Man, I'll plug a few books tonight, and none of them mine, remarkably, but one of them, Amity Shlaes, The Forgotten Man, is a history of the Depression. And when he was coming on and saying that this is the most horrible situation, and Amity came on and said, in 1933, unemployment in Toledo was 90%. 90%. Okay, it's tough right now. In California, it's 10.5% to 11%. Some pockets of the country, it's even 20%. But it's not a Great Depression. In fact, it appears that the recession is already over and that we have begun to climb out of this thing. But he needs it because of what Rahm Emanuel said. Mike plays it every morning. I drive to work every morning in my law firm. I'm listening to Mike. And he has one of those wonderfully produced openings where he always plays Rahm Emanuel saying, "A crisis is a terrible thing to waste." And what they mean by that is, the more you can scare people, the more leeway they will give you to enact major sweeping changes. And here's where the rub meets the road. I think the pandemic is serious, but the last thing you want to change if the pandemic comes back like the Spanish flu is the American system of healthcare. We have the greatest medical system in the world. Right? The greatest. We've got a couple of friends here who do work for Children's Hospital in Orange County, right in front of me. Children's Hospital in Orange County, like the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles County, if you ever have a child in trouble, that's where you want your child to be. And there are many facilities like that. I grew up in Cleveland, home of the world champions soon, Cleveland Cavaliers. And if you, I'm sorry, I know, yeah. Always talking to Lakers fans, just wait until 20 years ago. I know all about that. But the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, we have the best medical system. And I know it's expensive, but you know what? Nobody doesn't get treated. If this flu pandemic gets spread, no one will not be treated because of their income. Everyone will get treated. And so as a matter of radical scare tactics, they're going to use, I'm afraid, the pandemic to try and accelerate healthcare reform. And before we turn around, this great medical system will lie broken and almost unrepairable. Who are doctors here? Are there any doctors? One? Few? I keep asking every doctor after doctor, what do you think of this plan? There aren't any. I know there are a couple of radicals in New York, but there aren't any. One of our sponsors tonight, the Cancer Center of Irvine, an amazing place. I went down and toured it on Dennis's recommendation. It's amazing what you can have done and how you can survive in this country with the kind of care that Dr. Takeda and his staff give you. That will be gone in 6 months because he's scared us, Kevin, if we do not say, no, not my doctor, not my hospital, not my healthcare system. So yes, he is using fear.
Dennis.
I'd like to, may I comment on this question?
Yes.
It's worse than you think, in my opinion. I actually believe they are scared of the swine flu. That's the scary part. It's not just that they will use it, which I fully agree. The they is the left generally gets scared a lot. They do. They're scared of peanuts in schools. And I'm not kidding. Now, there are some conservatives who were scared of it too. I know that. All generalizations have exceptions. But overwhelmingly, and by the way, for those of you who think that I'm wrong on this, I'm going to be having a Harvard Medical School doctor on who wrote an article about how we increase the number of children allergic to peanuts by keeping children away from peanuts. That typically we are doing the wrong thing. And I always wondered, how come nobody in my elementary school died when we had peanut butter and jelly every single day? Now, that's not to say that there aren't kids who go into certain shock. It happens. There are kids who go into shock with bee stings, and yet we will ban picnics. I'm not kidding. There is no doubt in my mind that picnics will be banned for schools because some kid is allergic to bees, and it's not fair to him if they all go to the picnic where there are bees and he doesn't. There is literally, by the way, and I'll go back to the scares in a moment, there is nothing. You guys should try this on your show. I mean it sincerely. I want you to come up with something so absurd that the left has done that people will know you're joking. You cannot. No, I will prove it. I opened up one show. Some of you will undoubtedly recall this. I opened up one show with the following folks. You won't believe this. The ACLU is suing the government against using a straight letter T in any of its documents because it is a cross. See, he just said, are you serious? This is it. This is perfect.
Why didn't I hear about this?
Well, that's the point. I made the whole thing up. That was the point. That is my whole point. It's absurd, but you cannot think of an absurdity that isn't already thought of on the left. No one thought I was joking about the letter T, that it would need a hook, lest it be construed as endorsing Christianity in a document. I'm not kidding, you can't come up with one. We will ban picnics is absolutely plausible. I gave up after that. There is no more satire of the left available. It is self-satirizing, unfortunately. Now let me explain though about fear. They do live in fear. There was fear about population growth when I was in college. Remember ZPG, zero population growth? Right now, thanks to all the liberal and left countries in Western Europe is demographically disappearing. You know that. It takes 2.1 to keep the same population. Italy is 1.1. Spain is 1.4. and Germany is under 2, and Russia is 1 point something, whatever it might be. You can't, and certainly you can't have a welfare state without reproducing a great number of young workers to keep it going. The welfare state is available to you for a limited amount of time. And the left in America does not understand that, and we will pay a terrible price. Fear, however, is a very major part of what animates the left. ZPG was one, heterosexual AIDS in America. Before I went to KRLA, I was on KABC, and I'm sure many of you remember that. And I remember saying there that heterosexual AIDS in America is a myth, based on Michael Fumento's great piece and commentary and then his book. And I thought it was the only time in my 18 years at that station I thought I might be fired. Doctors were writing in to remove me from the air. How could I, a non-medical doctor, make such an assertion? It was a grand lie of Time and Newsweek putting on the cover white heterosexuals, women, the least likely group to get AIDS, as the norm and the future of a pandemic. Secondhand smoke, it's the only one I've not yet been proven right on. I will be. Every single scare of my lifetime, they have believed. Now let me offer you my theory, and then I'll keep quiet. Here is my theory. My theory is, and it's just a theory, but I'm prepared to stand by it in public. I think that the secular are more likely to be afraid than the religious. Because how do you explain that religious Jews and religious Christians are less afraid of global warming than secular Americans? How do you explain that? After all, religious people don't want to be boiled alive anymore, or have their children be boiled alive, or their shorefront property inundated by floods any more than anybody else. Secular people are more scared in general. And therefore, it makes sense that the secular left, which has both an agenda and no religious backbone, is going to be particularly frightened and use all these fears for their agenda. That is the one thing that is frightening.
Mike, I want you to think back on Obama's incredible cabinet choices thus far. Okay. Who do you think was his biggest blunder?
Collectively or individually? There's a fascinating streak and a pattern that developed with President Obama's cabinet selections, and I think it reflects what Dennis so brilliantly said about spirituality and morals and values. How satirical was it that over and over there were cabinet selections who decided they didn't have to pay their taxes? I mean, that's satire. It's like, are you kidding me? You want to be on the presidential cabinet and you didn't dot the I's and cross the T's and pay your taxes. And so it's an extraordinary, again, snapshot of not only the president's inability to properly vet cabinet selections, but without a question, without talking about, we go on a tangent about the spirituality, I want to quickly address the fact that it terrifies me that we have a commander-in-chief, the President of the United States, who hasn't yet selected a house of worship to go to church on Sundays. I don't get that. I'm sorry. I want our leader to go to church and hopefully get some guidance and some direction.
But Jeremiah Wright doesn't preach in Washington, D.C.
But he's on the road a lot. Without question, the disaster, the train wreck, the debacle, the three-ring circus is the Director of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. This woman, this poor lady is a nightmare. And the idea that this is the lady who's the point person to try to keep our country safe from another terror attack. I mean, we're not talking, first of all, the sharpest knife in the drawer for beginners, but more than that, this is a lady who also has that awful belief, I think, that terrorists can be persuaded and talked to and negotiated and held their hands. The things that she has said, the blunders she has made are so laughable, and again, they defy satire. So I predict that she's not going to last much longer. I don't know that she can survive tenure as the Homeland Security Chief, and maybe Arizona can take her back, because she's a nightmare. She's a mess. She's clearly the worst cabinet selection you made.
It's pretty amazing that you choose Napolitano, because that means that she would have had to have surpassed Biden, number one. But I heard something very scary on the way here tonight. I was listening to the Hugh Hewitt show.
Attaboy.
And I heard, if I heard correctly, Hugh, you had a guest on who was talking about Supreme Court choices in your 5 o'clock hour. And one of the names that I heard your guest say was Janet Napolitano for the Supreme Court.
Yep.
So, Mike, I hope that she's out of the Homeland Security office, but not for the wrong reason. Dennis.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Dennis, what about all the press conferences? And I want to hear Hugh's. Hugh, we'll go with you first. All right, same question. I want to hear about, what do you think, all the press conferences. I noticed an article recently, Obama's ratings have now dropped below American Idol on his nightly press conference. And I'm just wondering if these press conferences, are they doing the White House any good, this charade of showmanship?
I'm so glad to go in front of Dennis. Yes, they are fantastically successful. He is a very new president. Very new approach to governing. It was my honor to serve in the White House under President Reagan. I worked for President Nixon. I'm a student of the presidency, and I've never seen overexposure like this. But it's clearly Mr. Axelrod's theory that there is no such thing as overexposure. That the more you are in the public eye, the better off you are politically. And today they announced, it was leaked, that they will name the Supreme Court justice by the end of the week, which is consistent. Normally you would take a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks to make sure that you vet, but I think what has been revealed to me when I'm judging is that they will do whatever is necessary to keep the president in front of the people 24/7. In the past, it was viewed as, you didn't do that. You held back. You went to the American people on important moments. President Nixon on his silent majority speech. Ronald Reagan on his tax cut appeal after the assassination. But you didn't overexpose yourself because presidential capital was viewed as limited and you didn't want to use it up in a hurry. They've got a completely different theory, which is, he's had more primetime press conferences in 110 days than George W. Bush did in 2 terms. It's an amazing display of desire for attention. It makes sense for a Hollywood presidency. It does not make sense for a governing presidency. And as a result, yes, it's doing them some good, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with the good that it's doing.
And Dennis, that takes me to the question I have for you. I understand that Hugh says it's doing the White House some good. Is it doing the country any good?
Well, first of all, did you mention how many people were watching? I didn't quite hear it.
The last one was down to 29 million off of 49 million 6 weeks before.
Well, it does the country good if you're rooting for his politics. I mean, we have to be honest. If he were our man, I wouldn't be unhappy that he's doing it. He's not my man, and so I don't know what good it does. I think it.
You're going to be quoted on that. Is he your president?
Oh, not only is he my president, but
Thank
I
you.
announced. I'm glad you made that case. He's not my man politically. He is my president. I announced that, by the way, the day he was elected. I got a lot of hate mails from conservative, which was distressing, actually. You know, Dennis, you're a sellout. I'm a sellout. The man is elected. He's my president. That ends the issue. I mean, I want them to think that if we win, and we have to think that if they win. I mean, it's a non-issue. I'm glad you had me clarify that. It's the way it is. And by the way, and we lost because we don't know how to sell our values. Okay, we deserve to lose. All right, let me go on this tangent for just one moment. I don't want to be long-winded. The greatest generation was great in what it did in its incredible sacrifices at the domestic part of the family at home and the fighting part of the soldier abroad. My father was 3 years in the Pacific. That is, it was the greatest generation for that reason. but it also failed in a terrible way. Totally understandably, it transmitted none of the values that made them the greatest generation to their own children. Parents think, which is totally understandable, that values are gained by osmosis. You live in America, you'll gain American values. So they didn't articulate what it is to be an American, and so the greatest generation produced the dumbest generation. It is. I am a member of the dumbest generation in American history. And by the way, in every way but degrees, we are the dumbest. Now, it doesn't mean all of us. I think that there are very bright people, very wise people in my generation, but as a generation, the 60s, 70s generation, look, you have to be dumb to say, do not trust anyone over 30. What it means is that you will invent wisdom, which is the antithesis of wisdom and therefore synonymous with being dumb. To not understand that the great questions have been wrestled with by people prior to your birth. And some of them were even brighter than you, even though you went to Yale. And since the parents were fawning over their kid, the first to go to college, and the country was fawning over all of their college, and they learned in college, for example, that America's imperialist, that the Cold War is just as much America's fault as it is the Soviet Union's fault, that men and women are basically the same, that if you give boys teacups and girls trucks, then they'll play with them because it's all socialization. So we had a terrible problem of articulating values, and that's why we lost this election. Because it was partially a personality issue. Barack Obama is a phenomenon, there's no question. And Hillary Clinton may well have lost. But we should be a shoo-in. The values that Republicans and conservatives have are so obviously the ones that made America strong. Why would we want to be Sweden? What is there to emulate about Sweden? It pains me to ask this question, it's so rhetorical. Swedes who want to build a life, to have an entrepreneurial adventure in life, come to America. They don't stay in Stockholm. I get calls from Danes who moved to America, people who came from the welfare states of Western Europe. Which, by the way, brings me to a question, because the time goes so fast in one of these things, hopefully. If it goes slowly, it's not a good sign. I'm very curious, not for anything but curiosity. How many of you have seen my video, The American Trinity, The Case for American Values? Okay, actually it both heartens me and disheartens me that about 25 hands went up. But it heartens me in that in 5 days we got 40,000 views. I want you to please go and see on YouTube, type in Prager University. We've started something very, very high class, in 5 minutes making the case for certain things, including the American Trinity, e pluribus unum, liberty, and in God we trust. That is the American Trinity, like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost are the Christian Trinity. This is the American Trinity. We don't know it. We forgot how to articulate our values. If you analyze a Barack Obama speech, it is antithetical to so much of what we really do stand for, and people don't know how to articulate that. So now is our chance, if there is a chance. May I ask a question of my colleagues?
Yes.
Okay.
We allow one.
I'm sorry?
We allow one.
Okay, fine. One goes. Do you believe that if President Obama gets what he wants through with health care and with all of the spending and cap and trade and the solar panels and windmills instead of electricity and cockamamie light bulbs that don't work and poison you if they break in the room because there's mercury in them, if he gets nearly all of that, can this, what we consider damage, ever be undone?
It's a great question because it depends on how long he's going to be in control and how long Democrats are going to be in control. And you know, it seems to me that we talk very negatively and bleakly about not only his ideology, Dennis, and you forgot the little smart cars that we're driving, our little Tonka toys on the highways that he wants us to all drive. He wants to tell us what size car we drive. No, I have great fear and angst and anxiety about the future of our country, but I don't want to leave tonight without reminding everybody in this room about the power of hope and about the power of prayer and about the power of our youth. And you talk about the dumbest generation that we're in the middle of, and I'm with you, Dennis. I hope you heard about the shock jock in New York City who sent a producer out during the campaign with a tape recorder, sent him into Harlem, and found Barack Obama supporters. And this interviewer did a very fascinating thing. He applied all of John McCain's choices and ideologies to Barack Obama, and found a supporter at 125th Street, let's say in Harlem, and said, "Are you a Barack Obama supporter?" Yeah, I love Barack. I'm going to vote for Barack November the 4th. Well, what do you think about his selection as Sarah Palin to be his vice presidential running mate? The person said, "I love Sarah Palin. That's what I love about Barack Obama." You know, and the scary thing is, the person knew, oh, she's from Alaska, you know, she's the hunter, she's good, she's terrific, and I'm glad for her. And he said, "What do you think about his pro-life position?" "I love the fact that he's pro-life. He's against abortion." The fact is, we are really surrounded by idiots. I'll be signing that book in the back of the room after the thing, but fighting liberal lunacy in America. But just like the spirit tonight is one of analysis and debate and dialogue, there's also plenty of reason for hope. It reminds me, these events, these 100 Days of Obama tour events, remind me of the Tea Parties. And those Tea Parties were remarkable on a couple of levels. First of all, nothing went wrong. Did you notice? Nothing went wrong. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was trampled, because the mainstream media was waiting for that, and they would have given anything to have something go wrong. Nothing went wrong, and that's because there was such a positive spirit. I spoke in front of a crowd of 10,000 people on that Tea Party day in Greenville, South Carolina, of all places. 10,000 people came to downtown Greenville to rally and to talk about the issues we're talking about tonight. The other thing that energizes me about not only those Tea Parties but tonight is the youth. Young people who do get it. I'm sitting here in this room, I'm watching this young man who's 3 rows back. I'll bet he's 10 years old. Ron,
I bet he's 16, Mike.
15. I can't see with the lights, but he's 15 years old, suit and tie, he's nodding. He's obviously wowed by Dennis's brilliance, as we all are. And it's good for you to hear Dennis in person. And believe me, we all get an education. And this young man in the front, who happens to have a lineage that's very impressive, his name is Hewitt, James Hewitt, Hugh's son, 18 years old, is going off to college, and his buddy Andy. And I'm talking to James and his buddy Andy before this event tonight, and James is so connected to politics, what his dad does. He loves his old man, and he's so proud of his dad, and he's proud to have his dad be Hugh Hewitt, and this wonderful thinker and this brilliant guy that his dad is. But James gets it too, and his buddy Andy, and these guys are going off to college. They're 18 years old, and they're going to set the world on fire. And there's a whole bunch of young men like him and young men like you guys who are going to have to carry the torch and have to take these values that we're talking about tonight and push back the damage, Dennis, that this administration is inflicting upon the United States. It's not irreparable, of course. I tend to be, again, a pitchforks and torches guy, but we're going to get it back. But it's going to be thanks to the James Hewitts and the Andys and these young men of the world that are going to fight for our country and restore it to the greatness that we once enjoyed, that is slowly slipping through our fingers. And I'm glad they're in the room tonight, and I'm sure there are many more.
Hugh, Dennis's question.
First, he has to leave the car with gas in it once. I'm an optimist. Thank you, Mike. I'm a proud dad, very proud dad. I'm an optimist for a couple of reasons about Dennis's question. It will be massive amounts of damage, but if you try and take me and put me into a pair of 28 jeans and a size 38 sport coat, I suppose I could fit into it for about a minute and it would blow open. If you try and take American capitalism and put it into European socialism, it will not work. And I'll tell you why. In fact, I was talking about this tonight on the air. They've killed Chrysler. I come from a Dodge family. My dad was a small-town lawyer for many years, represented the Dodge dealership in Warren, Ohio for many, many years. So I always drove Dodges. I love Chrysler. And I was glad when Lee Iacocca stepped in and saved the company, and I've been rooting for him ever since. Well, now they've branded Chrysler is going to be owned 50% by the government and 40% by the United Auto Workers. No one who oh good, the government's going to make cars, I'll buy one of those. No one's going to buy, not no one, but it's going to plummet. So what's going to happen after that? Well, Brian from South Coast Toyota is standing in the front row. Brian, stand up. If you want your car, get a South Coast Toyota. Toyota is going to eat their lunch. They're going to absolutely eat their lunch. And that's because American capitalism thrives on delivering the best product at the lowest price that gives you value. And it's not going to be a Chrysler after that, but they'll thrive. Sonny Sardo is sitting here. Sonny, stand up and say hello to people. Sonny has been a KRLA sponsor. Sonny is up at 6 o'clock in the morning and 5:45, I've heard the ads. And he doesn't go home until the last job gets done, and if he has to go to the job on Saturday, he'll go to the job on Saturday. You cannot defeat American capitalism because American capitalism is about capitalists who like to make and produce. And I really do believe that the big gap between the president and the people in this room is the president has never made anything. He's never been in a private sector job. Now, think about that. Think about that. He has never been in the private sector. He was with a law firm for a little bit, but that's while he was in the state Senate. He was a senator from the United States Senate, and before that, he was writing books. Right? He's never been in a business where he had to actually make a payroll and would go out of business if the next day he did not drive that home. And I think that the people who are that way, when they see what happens, it's going to be an ugly 4 years, are going to throw that off like a skin off of a snake, like that 38 sport coat. So Dennis, I don't know if I persuaded you, but American capitalism cannot be killed.
I've got one.
I know what I want to comment. I want to tell you a very fascinating insight. I may be dead wrong, but this is the way my mind works. I love to see patterns. Most of the time I'm right, sometimes I'm really wrong. Here's a pattern that I have found my 9 years with Salem Radio, where I am a Jew working largely with Christians, largely with Protestant Christians.
You're Jewish?
Yes. I've come out of the closet, yes. In fact, oh, I don't have my yarmulke, all right. This was noted at a Salem conference back in Washington a number of years ago. And it's one of the reasons I am what I call a waspophile. I love wasps. They made America, and they have a spectacular attitude, one of which is a tremendous amount of optimism. Michael Novak, the great Catholic thinker at the American Enterprise Institute, and I were on a panel with a couple of others. They happen to have been Protestant. He's Catholic, I'm Jewish. We were the pessimists, and they were the optimists. And I don't think it was coincidental. I don't know, it's very hard for a Jew to be optimistic. It's also hard for a Jew to be entirely pessimistic. It's a very long-lasting people. If anybody should be optimistic, but if the optimism is solely, will you physically survive some remnant of you, that's hardly a big optimism. And so I am not as optimistic as my wonderful, and they are wonderful, colleagues up here. I think that's part of the reason. Part of it just may be one's nature. We didn't undo, and I'd like you to answer, either of you, we didn't undo anything of FDR. I don't know any reason to assume that we will be able to undo, and the left did not control nearly as much of America in FDR's time and after FDR as it does now. Elementary school, high school, college, graduate school, newspapers, news media, all news media. Only one opinion medium, the talk radio, is not controlled on the Wall Street Journal editorial page. Movies, ads, Broadway. It is saturated with one message, and so I don't know if it can be undone. I don't assume that goodness prevails. It doesn't generally, historically.
Dennis, there's no Works Progress Administration, there's no Civilian Conservation Corps, there's no National Recovery Administration. There is a Social Security Administration because we like the idea of a safety net for old people. It's a good idea, it's not a pervasive idea, and we just blew past all that. You know, it's not that we repealed it. We just blew past it. It's as though the American economy said, okay, SEC, whatever you want. We'll just grow way past that and burst the bounds of, we haven't destroyed the Department of Education. We grew past it. You know, Ronald Reagan ran on abolishing the Department of Education, should be one of your talking points. It's irrelevant to people who want to get an education. It's irrelevant. And so Gulliver could not be tied down by the Lilliputians. The American capitalism cannot be tied down by the regulators.
And we also, I think, are people who have to have a sense of faith. And, you know, when I hear the Bill Maher's of the world and the Christopher Hitchens of the world, it seems to me that they don't quite get faith. They don't understand faith. And that's why they're very analytical and they're very pragmatic. Faith is and I've heard, Dennis, you talk about it many, many hours on your show, this concept of optimism and faith. I think if we're to survive, we have to have that faith-filled optimism that we're going to survive this tough chapter we're in right now, because if we don't have that faith, we're going to be left with absolutely nothing. I want to tell you also quickly, as a personal testimony about the power of prayer. Prayer doesn't play a small role in this process. It doesn't play an insignificant role in this process. Listeners to my show in the mornings here on KRLA have been with me on a journey. I lost my precious soulmate, my wife Denise, this past June to cancer. And she left our 4 boys and me and our family and friends just reeling from how could this have happened. And Denise, when she was first diagnosed a couple of years ago, said, well, tell the story to your listeners, because maybe as we're fighting and we go to get these wonderful treatments and this wonderful doctors who are trying to beat back this horrible cancer that she had, maybe other families who are going through a similar challenge could be inspired from what we're going through. And so I did. I told the story. They said the company was gracious enough to set me up a studio in my house so I could be close to her and take care of her and go down the hall on breaks and go back and forth. And I will tell you something about the last year of her life. She never cried. She was never in pain. She was never anxious. And Denise, I'm not trying to make a martyr out of my Denise. She just had something supernatural that was driving her. I am convinced that because I was privileged to tell the listeners about what she was up against, she was the beneficiary of thousands and thousands of prayers from all over the country. People were praying for Denise and praying for me and praying for our sons. And I'm convinced that she didn't hurt, she never had pain, she never had fear, she never had anxiety, not because she was a spectacularly strong woman, but because she was lifted up by the prayers of maybe many of you tonight who prayed for her. And it worked. I promise you it works. I promise you prayers work. And in many ways, this precious woman I said goodbye to the last year, we had the best year of our life together. We traveled, we went on cruises, we laughed, we lived, we loved. And I think it's due to prayer. So please remember prayer tonight as we talk about these bleak things they're up against, because prayer does work. Very, very decidedly so.
Guys, one more question, and it's for Hugh, and it's regarding the president and pork, and to hear from him just for a few seconds.
Now, I'll be honest with you. Some of the critics of the plan have said, that's pork. I don't understand their criticism. Their basic argument is, well, you're trying to make policy instead of just doing short-term stimulus. Well, my whole attitude is, if we're going to spend billions of dollars to create jobs anyway, then why wouldn't we want to create jobs in things like clean energy that create a better economic future for us over the long term? That's common sense to me.
Quite simply, Hugh, what is your reaction when you hear this from the president?
Well, I think about the F-22, which is the world's most advanced fighter, a top-of-the-food-chain weapons system, employs thousands and thousands of Americans doing something that matters quite a lot, which is providing for the common defense. And so when the president comes out and cancels the F-22, which would cost less than $100 billion to completely outfit us in as many as, when you take $10 billion to build out what we need, but $100 billion, you know, a burp in his budget, to build more than the eye could see. And then he says windmills are what we really need to have. It just doesn't make any sense. What he did was he went to the members of Congress and said, spend as much money as you want on whatever you want, and they did. And in the course of that, at the end of this, 5 years from now, If you ask, what did we buy with the stimulus? Okay? You're not going to be able to find anything. If you walk around this magnificent facility tonight when we're done, you'll see some memorials to some specific people on the wall out there. They gave money to build particular things at the Nixon Library. I'm not sure who donated Kathy the East Room to be able to. Catherine Locher. This is the Catherine Locher East Room. She gave her donation. It built this magnificent room. At the end of 5 years, you will not be able to point to anything that came out of that stimulus.
Debt.
No, and no highway system, nothing.
Some debt. Yeah, a lot of debt. Guys, let's turn to some of the questions from our audience members, starting with 11-year-old Jeffrey Maxim. Dennis, what would you do about North Korea?
I will tell you in a moment. I have to just comment very quickly. Those of you who heard my show heard this story. My wife and I flew in from Chicago yesterday, where I spoke, and we flew in JetBlue to Long Beach. And Long Beach is a great airport because it's a pimple, and it's everything happens fast, and you drive, and it's just a joy. It's like flying to Pierre, South Dakota. And so I love going to Long Beach Airport. And I noticed yesterday 6 spectacularly ugly things in the front of the airport. They're called solar trees. They are giant poles with big slabs of some material in a rectangular form, which are solar panels. And they are, to anyone, ugly. And they are in the front of the airport. Across from them, alongside a wall, are 3 gigantic panels explaining why there was such ugliness at the airport. Now, I actually took my camera out and photographed this. It is going on pragerradio.com. You should visit that anyway. All of our websites you should visit. We all have great stuff on there. I will show you the panels, and then I took a picture of the explanation. In brief, I wish I could read it to you verbatim. Essentially, it said this: how proud Long Beach Airport is to have this, and that, listen to this in effect. The billboard was saying, these 6 panels are so powerful, they can supply the power to, was it, Sue, is it 120 or 12? 120 laptops at the same time. I told you, you cannot satire the left. This is as good an example of the idiocy that dominates the environmentalist movement.
So we're going to send a bunch of those to North Korea?
I'll try to tie it in.
Nicely done, Hugh.
Actually, if you look at North Korea from the satellites, they are solar paneled. That is exactly why there's no light there. But it's very frightening, actually. This is what we will change the economy in order. You need 6 gigantic solar tree panels to power 120 laptops. That's it. That's it. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. I just want to make that clear. I had to get it out of my system. All right. North Korea.
North Korea.
All right.
North Korea.
I'm glad he didn't fly more this week.
Yeah, you get a lot more stories. You're right. Tomorrow to Sacramento. You going to Sacramento?
I'm going to Sacramento.
Going to Sacramento?
Phoenix.
Going to Phoenix? Anyway, first of all, this is not a cop-out. I am a pragmatist. I would do anything that works. If negotiating with them worked, I would negotiate. If sanctions worked, and then I would obviously engage in that, although it wouldn't matter that much to them because they already starved their people. And the issue with North Korea is China. If we can't twist China's arm on North Korea and nuclear weapons and rockets, when Japan is the most frightened of all by all of this, if we have no leverage over China on that, and I don't know what China's interest could possibly be in a strong North Korea. If anybody knows that North Korea is run by a lunatic, it's China, because they know the beautiful Kim family. Kim Il-sung dad, Kim Jong-il the son. And therefore, that's a bad sign. In all of what is going on, the pressure has to be, maybe we have no pressure on China, then that in itself is revealing. But that is the only way to North Korea that I know of. Sanctions do not work on a country that is already functionally a concentration camp.
And to Hugh, the aviation industry, Hugh, has a term, the point of no return. Do you believe that the Republican Party is at the point of no return?
Oh, no. I think, look, my first political campaign was 1974. 1974 was the Watergate baby year, when in the aftermath of President Nixon's resignation that summer, every Republican in the country got wiped out. And then I remember 1986, the second Reagan off year, and we all got wiped out. I remember 1992, driving back from KCET at night, and Bill Press, God love him, the one, the only, the wrong, Bill Press, was cackling on the radio, "Happy days are here again." He was singing, I could still hear it, and that was bad. And so Republican and Democrat have bad years, and then they go through a period of time where people ask questions, have we reached the point of no return? And then then people, like in this room, do things like subscribe to Town Hall Magazine and join TalkPack and go out and support different kinds of candidates, and they recover, they renew, and they return to the majority. So absolutely not.
Mike, who do you like among current Republican leaders?
There are two Republican governors that I've had the opportunity to spend a considerable amount of time with. One is South Carolina's Governor Mark Sanford. He's a guy who I think has got an extraordinary eye for fiscal conservatism, social conservatism, a pragmatism, but always with those values that have been grounded into him. And also Governor Rick Perry from the state of Texas. These are a couple of guys who I think have those kind of, and he's pushing back right now on the border. Yes, I know he talked about the secession of Texas. He really didn't say, he was really trying, I think, to champion the idea of states' rights, and that's still a concept that I think counts even in California. The idea that there is a sovereignty and states' rights that our country has respected. But there's a whole plethora of Republicans who I think are on the horizon, and I'm going to say it and let the left cackle and roll their eyes, but I happen to love Governor Sarah Palin. I think she's fantastic. She's the real deal, and she absolutely has a whole bunch of chutzpah, and
Wait.
chutzpah. I tried. I gave it my best shot. But
You got a C.
CH. I do believe that the Republican Party is at a crossroads, though. I think that we have warring factions. We have social conservatives, we have fiscal conservatives, we have national security conservatives. And we're going to have to figure out a way to converge all of these not warring, but disagreeable factions in order to get the party back. And I truly believe that we've got to go back to the basics, and we've got to go back to the common denominator, which is liberty, and look at the things that this administration is doing that is slowly eroding, well, rapidly eroding our liberties, one by one. And we have to remember what defined the Republican Party in its inception, and what continues, I think, to build the Republican Party, and that's the idea that liberty defines us, our country, and we've got to resist this sort of tyrannical approach to this heavy, ham-fisted, big-spending, tax-and-spend, big-ticket government that Barack Obama is all about.
Kevin, I have a quick question
Yeah.
for the audience. How many of you are voting no on Measure 1A? To me, this is the most significant thing in the first 100 days of Obama postscript, is that this huge tax and spend ripoff, this deceitful ballot measure is going to get crushed, and it's going to show that even in blue California, this far and no farther.
I have a question for the audience. Having seen that show of hands, how many of you are now willing to admit if you're going to vote yes on 1A through 1A?
That was funny. That was very good. That was very good.
Thank you, Dennis.
I like dark humor. That was good.
High praise.
Yeah, I know.
High praise.
I got that once during town hall, too. Actually, that was from Hugh. It was a Schwarzenegger joke. Yeah. Dennis, with Obama's current agenda, where do you see the weaknesses that the GOP can make inroads?
Oh, well, for one thing, in fact, if the economy doesn't recover and people start realizing that with the greater pressure on the handful of people who still pay federal taxes is actually not working, then I think that the argument can be made to the American people. In fact, I wish that they implemented some of these things immediately. What is the name of this cockamamie light bulb that they want us to use? What is that?
Compact fluorescent.
Compact fluorescent. Do you know about this light bulb? Well, this is being mandated. Within years, you won't be able to get the regular light bulb that you now screw in and works every time.
That was the 12-year-old that told us that, by the way.
What?
15, okay. Kidding.
Anyway,
I said 16 earlier.
this is this curly light bulb that produces a different type of light. It's dark, among other things, but the killer is that they're not working. They're not working in large numbers. B, seriously, it comes with it directions. If it breaks, you drop it, you must open up the windows to your house and leave, because it's mercury and it is dangerous. So again, you can't satire the left. This comes with the light bulb. I've given up satire, just tell the truth. If enough people start experiencing this, if the choice of automobile is now dictated financially by the government, we bailed out Chrysler and GM in order for them to produce green cars, so we will give you a ton of money to buy a green car, and enough people resent the idea that the government is manipulating the way in which we purchase things, then there are possibilities. Obviously, if there is, God forbid, an attack, and this I don't wish on any administration, let alone on my fellow Americans, that if there is an attack, given the changes that have been made in this administration in that arena, excuse me, I do think that too would be a weakness. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with Israel. The bulk of Americans still think that Israel is a litmus test, and a fair number of Americans, particularly Christians, feel that Israel is an acid test for American moral strength, that the abandonment of Israel to those who wish to crush it in whatever form that will take is a bad sign about America, and that a lot of Christians believe that is a big deal. By the way, Christians here should know there is a great organization. There's no agenda here, except Christians United for Israel, John Hagee's magnificent organization. And I just know, I know about it because I worked for them for years. I will be the keynote speaker at their annual Washington conference. And if you are a Christian for Israel, in fact, if you are anybody for Israel, it'll be 3 of the most wonderful days you could spend in Washington. So I just wanted to throw that out for your awareness.
You are getting the hook big time.
Oh, really? I have one question.
Pamela's going to
All right, I have one final question, and it is to you, Hugh.
Oh, good. Let's go long.
I knew what my... I knew I'm
such a
only
hurry
7
now, are you?
minutes. I'm only 7 minutes past, but these guys are pretty good tonight, so I thought I could push for a few more minutes, right? Hugh, the final question from a listener here tonight. Hugh, I have 9 grandchildren from ages 1 to 21. What kind of taxes will they have to pay over their lifetimes to pay for the continuing stimulus? And it's signed, Hugh, love to you, Elaine.
Well, I thank you for that. I think none of us can tell. The answer will be a new Reagan will arrive, a new Jack Kennedy. They will cut taxes. We will grow our way out of it. We've been in much deeper debt per capita basis and a GDP basis at the end of World War II. All you have to do is let American capitalism do what it's going to do. But I'd rather get started sooner because it's a very big hole we're digging. And the first rule of holes is you gotta stop digging. And if you want to get out of a hole. And so don't worry too much. American capitalism's done it before. We'll do it again. I'd just as soon get started earlier.
And that wraps up tonight.
Hold on. I just want to make one final word, if I may.
You knew that was going to happen, right?
Okay, one final word. It's very important, and I know the 3 of you will agree with this final word. we in talk radio are sort of a last bastion right now of public things that hold the values that the vast majority of you share with us. I am proud of us, but that's not why I'm saying it, because we can be an endangered species if the Democrats have their way with any form of a fairness doctrine or whatever. That is why it is not only good sense for you to patronize our sponsors, because we pick very, very, very quality people. But secondly, it is a vote for keeping this radio alive. I mean, this is a very tough time for radio generally, but it's particularly going to be tough if the Democrats have their way in they have a bill for diverse ownership. There are not enough women and minorities owning radio stations. Oh, we don't want to shut down talk radio. We just want to change owners, or whatever this music thing. This is something I didn't even know about. Yeah. So please know that it's a vote for what you care about, as well as good for you to patronize our sponsors. And some of them are here tonight, and some of them you just hear on the radio. Please think of that. By the way, this is, you don't have to ask me, this is a Roger Stewart suit.
As is this.
And one final word. Okay? It is, and you are even welcome to rub it a little bit to see what fine material it is. One more thing, there is another sponsor here I just want to mention. All of them are dear and precious to us. My wife and I, by the way, I have a new wife and she should stand. Sue, would you wherever you are, Sue, would you please stand? Sue and I were down with Alan, actually, my other wife, and so Sue, Alan, and I were down in the Dominican Republic, and we visited Cure International's hospital there. They're another sponsor, and Sue said, and she's been on great trips with me, safaris in Africa, and we travel a lot, thank God. We're very blessed. She said it was the greatest 3 days that she ever traveled, and it had nothing to do with the Dominican Republic, or little to do with it, which was a fine place. After all, they do produce cigars. That alone makes me love them, plus baseball players. How better can you get? But she did because of the people we met who build these hospitals around the world to treat kids who would otherwise never be treated in their lives. There were two heads of Cure International who were here, and I'd just like them to stand. And I want to make sure I pronounce them correctly because they have titles. Well, forget the titles. Dale Carpenter and Lisa Wolf. Wherever you are, would you please stand?
And with all of the acknowledgments, allow me to say for a moment about these gentlemen on the stage. I'm kind of a little bit of the new kid on the block as the morning host on KRLA, and I've gotten to spend some great, considerable quality time with Hugh and of course with Dennis. Besides being such smart guys and great thinkers, they're just good-hearted people who truly do care about their country and about our audience. And to that end, I want to thank you for coming out to this beautiful, beautiful place and on a Monday night and supporting 870 KRLA, the general manager of the station, Terry Fay, and his team putting on a great, great event tonight. But thank all of you for being a part of this tonight. We appreciate you very, very much.
And a couple of things to wrap up. Mike, you guys are staying after, right? Some of you are signing books, and all right. Well, and the host will be staying signing books. Also, in addition to driving carefully home tonight, because I haven't done it all night, and I do want to do it. There is incredible news right now here in Southern California, especially about the real estate market, and that does give an opportunity for refinancing your home. There is a sponsor tonight. You've got to check their rates. You can do it online. freehomerefi.com, and they are here as well. The two guys from freehomerefi.com. So stick around and can join us otherwise. Thanks to our hosts, and thanks to you, our listeners. Please keep listening and spread the word. 870 KRLA. Tune in on your way home. Thank you, Mike.